testimony. We're going to keep going on H386 now, and we have with us on Zoom is Nikki Leonard, who works with the Intervale Center. And Nikki, I'm not sure that you've been in our committee before. If you want to just give us some quick background on who you are and tell us a little bit about the Intervale Center, and then any thoughts that you want to share on this, on the bill, or on the I guess the thinking behind the bill. We'd be happy to hear that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you, everyone. Again, I wish I could be there in person. But first and foremost, thank you to Representative Supernat for proposing this bill, and to you all for your, wanting to learn more about this topic of ag land transfer programs and just kind of the resources that already exist, right? And just kind of how best to offer possible additional or more robust services for our Vermont farmers. And yep, I am Nikki Leonard. I am a statewide farm business specialist at the Intervale Center. I'm part of the Farm Business Services team there, who we work with farmers one-on-one on their business planning, on land access, and financial advising. We are a small team of 4, but small but mighty. We work with about 120 Vermont farmers a year to kind of help them meet their business goals. And we're also part of, the VHCB Farm and Forest Viability Network, as service providers, and whom you've already heard, give their testimonies this morning. So, right, why I'm here today, I'm here on behalf of Vermont Land Link, to kind of present to you all, how this free online portal already exists, connecting farmland owners looking to sell or lease or otherwise kind of make their land available to farm seekers, and the direct land access and farm transfer services that we also provide through the site. And I also like to share some of my support too for the other ideas proposed in this bill to make kind of this land portal more widely known, because that's always a need of ours, and just part of a greater effort to connect landowners and farmers through the educational workshops and networking events that you had outlined also in this bill. I think that's a really wonderful idea. So a little bit about the history of the website, if those are not familiar with Vermont Land Link, it was actually originally created through a partnership of organizations that once made up about 15 years ago, the Vermont Farmland Access Network. These organizations were us, the Intervale Center, Land for Good, UVM Extension, and the Vermont Land Trust. But back then, the website was just kind of a basic clearinghouse of properties, just kind of listing details about, the properties, easy for landowners to post information and easy for farm seekers to search the listings, but just kind of very user driven, nothing more than that. Because of the need for a greater capacity to keep this website going, we, the Intervale Center, brought Vermont Land Link in-house, and we still manage it today. And through the years of having it under our management, we've added educational resources, and I guess more kind of wraparound support services to help ensure kind of those successful land connections, and just kind of wanting to create a fuller experience for the user. And kind of in this time, in the rise of Zillow and, Realty.com, Vermont Land Link really stood out and kind of allowed farms to have an alternate to kind of the real estate sales system that's not really set up for farm sales. And in any given year, there was about 50 to 60 land listings posted on our website and upwards of 1,000 or more farm seekers. So pretty imbalanced in those numbers, but I think that those numbers speak for the greater need of available land to a lot of our farm seekers. Most recently, last year, the need to overhaul our website due to its platform becoming outdated and pretty dinosaur relic, it was about to expire, and so it was pretty urgent to seek out funding. And because of special thanks to the state of Vermont's Working Lands Enterprise Initiative, we were awarded close to $24,000 in grant funding to be able to do a redesign and kind of overhaul of the website, and to be able to provide even more direct farm services. And so we actually just relaunched our new version just this February, just 2 months ago. With more improved features, the mapping tool is better than ever. We have a better communication channel for users to connect and talk to each other. And just simply the listings are just more visually dynamic and informative. And we even kind of widened the farmland scope and focus to include specifically grazing and forest opportunities that weren't available to Vermont Land Link before. And also kind of, I think, the first of these land listing programs and sites across the country to offer specifically grazing and forest opportunities. And again, kind of one of our goals in this redesign was to really inject quality and trust to the users that I think kind of had decreased over the years, just for not having, clear transparency that we now have on the new site. And some of the stats for, just in the 2 months that we launched the rebuild, we have about 88 new users, 5,000 new site visits, 10 new land listings, and about 12 new farm seeker profiles. So, it's still constantly used and going strong. Me as somebody who manages the website and kind of oversaw the update, I can speak to that such a portal requires a daily administration, and much greater capacity and funds than once was needed just to, make it effective and fully comprehensive to the state that it is now. And also just letting you all know that, Vermont Land Link, we are also part of a greater New England Farm Link collaborative, where we kind of share the mission with other New England states to connect farmers and landowners. We do cross postings, referrals to farm specialists. We join together and offer educational programming with online workshops, do collaborative outreach, and just kind of build, better awareness and connections across New England. And kind of with that, I had mentioned kind of in the beginning, there is always a need to broaden awareness of Vermont Land Link. And maybe even some of you didn't know that Vermont Land Link even existed before, this week. So, I think it'd be a very effective opportunity for landowners and farm seekers, to do that networking and learn more about existing farm transfer services offered through farm and forest viability, through our organization, through our partners, through Vermont Land Link. But we need kind of the creation of funding opportunities for us and the site to be able to kind of offer these events. And as somebody who also directly helps farm seekers find secure and affordable and quality land in Vermont, just kind of lastly, I can speak to the challenges farmers do face trying to access land, and just want to, again, offer my support for the other items that were mentioned in this bill as they relate to researching new tax incentives and other mechanisms to reduce, the farm transfer costs, just to accelerate farmland transfers, and just making these lands more affordable to our next generation of farmers, because that is probably the largest barrier. So thank you for this time, and thank you again just for your willingness to learn more.
Thank you. Thank you. Questions from committee? Representative O'Brien.
I'll get to a question. There's been discussion in this committee about, I guess, mapping of agricultural lands or potential agricultural lands, starting sort of with, where are the best soils for farming. And then say Ryan Patch from the agency has come in the context of the new Act 250 and these tiers, that there's a certain amount of great land, even within the tier 1A,
And 1B.
10,000 acres, something like that, within the village centers. So I was just wondering, I mean, this morning we've been talking a lot about transferring from sort of one farm succession issues to another new generation of farmers. how much are you involved in sort of saying these places ideally should be farmed, but they're not farmed now? I mean, there's the pressure between, I think Ryan said, that all the places, a lot of places in Vermont are steep, wet, or stony, and they're not great for farming. And those are all the places that people want to build houses or develop too. So there's that tension there. And I just wondered how much you try to connect, say, a property that would be great for a farm, that's not farmed at the moment, I guess, and connect a future farmer with a great piece of Vermont soil.
Yeah, that's a great question. I am not directly involved in kind of that mapping, project and such. However, on Vermont Land Link, we do put, an easy connection and a tool and kind of a teachable moment for users to directly connect them to, the tools and resources of Vermont Natural Resources Atlas, being able to identify soil types, quality, and we really try to recommend them go into details of soil quality. And I think especially for part of our user population that are not farmers, so non-farming landowners, having them understand the expectations of our farmers' needs, such as quality of soils, prime ag, state, classified, and just kind of giving them those tools at their disposal. And, having them learn that soil types and just the mapping abilities to see their properties in a whole new way, and for farm seekers to also have access to that information while searching for new properties. So they may not directly answer your question, but these tools exist on the website, and we're here to teach how to utilize those tools.
That's great, thank you.
Nikki, when somebody goes onto your site and starts looking either to find land, or maybe they've got land that they're interested in transferring or selling, do you always end up reaching out to or having contact with those people, or are they often just using the website and then directly contacting another party?
Yeah, that's a great question. And with the relaunch, we are able to be really hands-on and really engage the users in a way that hasn't been done before. I think the Vermont Land Link of past was kind of what you mentioned, kind of the latter of, it was just very user-driven. They would search the property listings, click on a resource link here and there. But, our version right now, connected with the Intervale Center, we can be really hands-on. So kind of the stats that I listed of new land postings, new farm seeker profiles, I directly have communicated, with them individually to help better the quality of their posting, answer questions, kind of remind them of the supporting services for land access support, farm business planning. So again, it's now at a point that it can be really wraparound services that we're really proud of.
Does your reach extend evenly across the state, knowing that the Intervale is where it is, and that somebody down in the southern part of the state or the Northeast Kingdom might not, think, oh, the Intervale is a good resource for me just geographically?
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's been kind of a 15-year-old website and tool, a lot of our partners, a lot of folks in the Farm Viability Network, they use this as kind of the go-to website, go-to portal for their farmers, whether they're at a point to make their land available, to sell, to lease, otherwise, or for the farm seekers that they're working with. Hey, check out Vermont Land Link. It's pretty known throughout our organizations and networks that do cover the state. But again, it would be remiss to say that, everyone in the state should know, all of our service providers should know about this. I think it's always a good opportunity just to, if there's ways to broaden the awareness, we're all for it. I think the outreach point of this relaunch is kind of what we're looking at next steps. And we would love to kind of cover every part of the state that is less aware of this tool.
I guess the other thing that maybe you can give us a little, insight into possibly is where there are gaps or where in the existing, ecosystem, uh, trying to connect landowners with would-be farmers or landowners. Where can we collectively be doing better, or where are there challenges?
Yeah. I think over the recent years, there's been a drop off of farmers ready to sell or transfer their farm to want to post it on Vermont Land Link in fear of being inundated with inquiries that maybe these farmers or new farmers are just not at the point to go into that process. So I think farm owners are just still not confident to post their opportunities on this website. And so that's, again, kind of where we're at of the outreach point of really injecting, again, the trust and quality of this website and what it can do. But we need the content. We need the farm owners to be able to post their opportunities, and put the content on this site. So I think the gap is, getting to farm owners a level of confidence that we're here also to support them through this process. We can also, on their behalf, take and vet some of the inquiries coming in, figure out ways to, maybe the farm owners would request a business plan, required before they make contact. There are ways to kind of reduce that fear of just being inundated by folks who are just not ready to sign the dotted line.
Thank you for that. Typically, are you working with landowners who actually want to sell their land, as opposed to maybe are just looking for somebody else to work the land, but want to continue living where they are and owning their land?
So if I heard you correctly, kind of farmers who want to sell their land, but possibly still remain, their living days on site, maybe like a life estate or just kind of that farm transfer option that may be available.
Well, I think, yeah, sorry, I was a little unclear. Just thinking about selling land versus leasing the land. Are you providing a marketplace for both of those?
Yes, we hope to. There is more leasing opportunities right now posted and available, but definitely, historically the sale opportunities were there as well, and we would like to increase those opportunities posted on the website moving forward. Again, I think it kind of goes to the distrust, lack of transparency that because of the platform that it was on a couple of years ago was just kind of failing. There were a lot of bugs and quirks to the website that I think drove some user activity away from the site. So we really want to bring it back up, which we did with the relaunch. And now it's just getting the word out that it's better than ever. And, we definitely want for sale opportunities posted on this website.
Thank you. Representative Nelson has a question.
Yeah, thank you. Nikki, I don't know what the average size farm is in the state of Vermont. I don't know if it's 100 or 200 acres or 250 acres. So how do we help, find people? I don't know if a lot of people want to buy into a 200-acre farm. So you working to help people put people together so the farm could be broken down? And then, how do they live there? Or do they commute there or whatnot? Those are some of the questions I have.
Yeah, those are also really great questions. Yeah, if you take, your typical historical, generational Vermont farm, it can be 50 acres, 150 acres plus, like you mentioned. And a lot of the time, that value of that larger whole farm, that parcel, is pretty unattainably financially for a beginning farmer. So we do get inquiries from, young farmers trying to farm together, trying to buy land together to solve for that affordability issue, or even just not wanting to manage the full 50, 100, 300 acres. So those are the type of services that land access support to try and come up with a creative model, both in management and legally, and kind of work through all of the risks and considerations for that pursuit. But we also work with really closely the Vermont Land Trust, in their conservation efforts and easements and other mechanisms to make it more affordable. When, say, a property is conserved and the option to subdivide it and sell those bits off are not available because that is restricted on the easement. So it turns into us helping folks collectively farm together and manage that and try and find more affordable mechanisms to make those larger parcels more financially feasible.
And perhaps it's working with VHCB and VLT and saying, this agriculture's changed in the state. Milk production's changed with co-ops not wanting to take on new members, base programs and whatnot. And, there is room and need for diversified agriculture in the state of Vermont. And yes, land trust, they do have some pretty persnickety rules about subdivision, and maybe it's working with land trust and VHCB to adapt their rules to new agriculture and to allow a farm that's been conserved or going to be conserved to be broke down into suitable acreage sizes. Perhaps you take the timber off it and you lease that to someone that has a sugar bush or wants to manage timber. And then you take the arable soils out and, you have 150 acres and you have 4 people that want to farm and may not want to farm collectively, but they'd like to own 25, 40 acres or whatever. And you break that land down so that it's desirable and manageable for these new farmers in a different scale. 250 acres of vegetables is probably pretty daunting unless you're highly mechanized, but, yeah, I'm getting a high sign over here. So anyway, that's just some thoughts that maybe, working with groups like yours and the others we've heard from today and going to these NGOs and saying, we all need to work together to make this more palatable and workable.
Yeah.
2 cents.
Yeah. I think you're hitting on, initial well-intended goals, of maybe conservation and VLT. Maybe, today's evolving farmer goals, it's just not a perfect system. That's why I think we need continued research for, alternative ways to be able to collectively own those larger parcels together, collectively be able to find a model that you can own part and not the whole, or just what that looks like, and separating maybe a legal entity with the land versus, multiple business entities all kind of working together. But yeah, it is definitely the biggest challenge for, you had mentioned those historical dairy farms, and maybe a possible diversified veg farmer wants to overtake and utilize that land. And no matter what they're farming, even if it is 250 acres of diversified crops, it may not fully support the new land value of that land. And that's a challenge that we're facing.
Representative O'Brien.
Nikki, you probably already done this, but from your description, the introduction here, like for one, I've been on this committee for what, 7 years now, and I've never really connected Vermont Land Link to the services you provide. So I'm just wondering, right, how to get the word out there more. Like if I was a wannabe farmer, just moved here from Kansas, if I called up the Agency of Ag, or if I went to the NOFA conference, would I hear of Vermont Land Link somehow?
That is the hope. And I believe that you would. Yeah, we're not a web developer, organization. It was a tool that we kind of inherited, and the transparency of who's behind managing Vermont Land Link was not obvious until now. And so now if you have visited the site, the hope is you do easily understand that the Intervale Center is behind it, and you can easily, through the Vermont Land Link, access any of our farm service, our team, our services. So that is the goal. And it was almost like, now we're proud of having this tool in-house, and having a consistent messaging with the rest of our organization. So yeah, I have homework for you to ask around about Vermont Land Link and see if folks are aware of it, and for you to learn more.
And the other thing, you probably done this too, is when VHCP comes in, or Vermont Land Trust, they always have their success stories. We see slides of this farm in Moncton or this farm in Shasberry, Orwell, right? That they helped facilitate, a transfer, or somebody found their future farm that way. And it might be great for you to have your success stories, narratives, and testimonials on how Vermont Land Link was successful in connecting a future farmer with a piece of property.
Yeah, that's an excellent idea. And we do have a page already dedicated for success stories in those matches. We're wanting to build that out. So again, that's kind of part of our next chapter of outreach, of getting those stories and interviews and photos and but yeah, it's really amazing of the different stories out there. And there was even one of a farm seeker, looking for some grazing land for her sheep. And lo and behold, there was a property posting, and it was one of her neighbors down the road that she had no idea was offering and looking for farmers to utilize their land. So those stories are out there, and we would love to put them on the website and share them. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Nikki, thank you very much.
Thank you all. I'll just sign on. I am a real person. I just have the sniffle, but thank you all. It's a pleasure to meet you virtually. And thank you again for this proposed bill.
Well, we hope you're feeling better soon. And when you are sometime, if you're in Montpelier, please stop by and say hello.
Will do. Thank you so much.
So we don't have any other scheduled testimony. We're missing almost a full mass. But we can, if there's any sort of thoughts on this, I don't know that we have any other scheduled testimony. Yeah, actually today we don't have any other scheduled testimonies, and the floor is going to be short this afternoon. So there's that. Tomorrow, I'm going to be out. Representative Balzo's going to be out. We are on the floor in the morning, and then we have some testimony in the afternoon scheduled. And it'll probably be a short day tomorrow as well.
You're going to be out tomorrow?
I'm going to be out tomorrow, yeah.
We have testimony in the afternoon?
Yes.
You trust me to run amok in here without you?
It's going to be Representative Vice Chair Supernaut will be keeping everyone from running amok.
You can probably make something out of
Get
this.
ready.
I mean, listen in itself.
But yeah, no, any thoughts on you're welcome to share any thoughts, but anybody is, yeah. Yeah,
We're
we're
gonna stay live.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I mean, I think what I find remarkably helpful is that there are so many folks who are interested and already engaged in this work. And I think the primary purpose of this bill was to just bring all those conversations together in a really collected, cohesive way. And personally, and obviously in deep collaboration with the committee, I am so amenable to figuring out ways to invest in portals that already exist, invest in the work that's already being done. I am a huge, I don't want to increase redundancies in work that is already out there. I just want to make sure that if there are gaps and opportunities to really round out some of that really critical work that is being done, and I think we heard some of them today, that this could be a real opportunity. And it was nice to hear that folks are excited about engaging in that work, so it's my initial reflections.
I just brought up their website.
Mhm.
I didn't go to all the different pages, but they, it came up fairly quick. I know across the road in the brick building, they've got some block brick building, they've got some things they do there. We heard from Land Trust and, yeah, somehow just making it, and I don't know, Heather, how people do that. I'm 61 years old, I'm not, and in my world, you know what your neighbors are doing and stuff. And so I'm trying to wrap my head around. And I'm open and hoping that, we can make this so young people that, in your situation, can strike out and find these things. And, but I think some of it has been brought to light that, you take that traditional farm and it's more than you want. But you want a part of it, and it's having VLT, asking them to either authorize it or find the ability to change their bylaws so they can be cracked down to a workable size. The place I told you about in Newport, it's fairly sizable piece of land, and they have a very small vegetable operation on it, and it's been organically aid the rest of it. Break that down so there could be 10 different vegetable farmers on it or something, and they all have their own area and own it. And because there's pride in ownership, and you could lease the owner or whatever to make the financing work. And that being owned outright by Land Trust, they've never conveyed it to anyone else. They have the opportunity to market it as they wish, whereas it's not, as I said earlier, that's the farmer's retirement.
It's an interesting question, and I think we might want to see if we can dig into it a little bit more to see how much of a challenge it's been. Nobody mentioned it earlier, and which doesn't mean that it hasn't been an actual challenge, but I think we can get the Land Trust to, come in and talk about, are there parcels that are just so large that's their size, alone, or at least size contributes to the challenge.
Yeah, I mean, some of it, someone wants to buy the whole block. A Hills down in Bristol or a Sapir or Gladstone, and there's a whole litany of them. But there may be other farms that lend themselves to this opportunity, or Heather wants to get into that river bottom land. Hopefully it doesn't flood, and expand her, bring her operation there. And so it's just, having a carve out.
Yeah, and I think if I also may add on to that, we might not have heard of existing barriers around that specific interest, but we did hear Jake say that we are looking at alternative models for land ownership, and I do think that that is a nod towards the scale of some of these parcels that are for sale, and recognizing that 200 acres is a lot, and a lot of young farmers are not really wanting operations that large. So I think it would be great to integrate some of those stories into that.
In my world, sometimes you don't want the buildings and the house and, you know, so they could say, well, we're gonna keep the building and house and 30 acres or 40 acres or 25 or whatever could work for an emergent farmer. And then the rest, you know, could be conveyed off separate, or, you know, you split the whole darn thing up, but allow for a house site on each one.
Mhm.
Because people want to live on their land. All right, I totally get that. And support it.
Well, along these lines, it'd be interesting to talk to like VHCB about, you know, we have this need for farm ag land transition, and we also have this need for housing, and so there might be funding sources if you say it had 100 acres, 10 acres becomes, you know, some sort of dense housing piece that provides funding for the farmers who farm the rest of it, and VHCB might have some ideas there. Everything we've been talking about as far as current use and land use change tax, but they're in that world.
Yeah.
And they might work together.
What the way you're thinking.
It's interesting because I think from a, you know, an
Rhythmic.
algorithm, I'm so tired right now. Viewpoint, it's like, oh, you know, chopping up larger chunks of land, bad, you know, maintaining larger chunks, good, you know, but, and I can see how, like, say you have a 100-acre block and you say, okay, what if VHCB was to suddenly say, okay, we're gonna look at certain opportunities where this makes sense, where we take that 100-acre block and chop it up into 10. And every block can have a house and be conserved. Now, I think the fear is that person could start out farming and, you know, 3 years later say, I'm just gonna sell it.
Mm-mm.
And then it's not really farmed anymore. However, to me, like, so we have a lot of vegetable farms that are 10 acres in the state
Or less.
or less. And it's like, that's a good model for farming. So I don't think we can just say, look at land size or parcel size and say whether or not this is good for the working landscape. And in fact, like, it looks like a 10-acre or 100-acre chunk divided into 10 with 10 homes right now. And those 10 landowners are all interested in farming. That sounds actually pretty awesome. Like, that's a community right there of farms that could share tools. But there is something, I think, like you said, the pride of ownership and having your own parcel. Well, you could say, well, they could say, well, let's take the 100-acre block and do some sort of shared ownership scheme. Well, honestly, like, a lot of those shared ownership programs, like, have problems. Like, if you actually go, I would love to take testimony from people on that.
The
because
commune model.
it does have struggle.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm sure that it would be interesting testimony, yeah.
But when you own it outright, I feel like I think there's more opportunities for success. When you're in a shared ownership scheme, like, you just automatically tie people's hands up in a line of work that's not easy to do in the first place. So,
You know, I'm thinking that we hear often how, you know, the number of farms has dropped, you know, steadily over the past many, many years, and farm acreage has dropped, but not by as much. And that this is because people are buying up farms, are getting, and dairy farms being, you know, one example of that, you know, getting larger. And we tend to think, oh, well, you know, that's too bad that we don't have as many farmers. And this is sort of getting at the same thing, I think, what you're saying. So, yeah, I think I would be interesting, and maybe folks who are interested in moving this bill along could have some conversations with the people that we've just been talking about, those organizations, and see whether there's, you know, what their feelings might be on it. It might be a good next step. I think it would be good. And we get them in for testimony maybe next week.
It might be interesting to have in, I mean, they mentioned in the slideshow, the Harlow's Organic Farm, and they've transitioned from a single owner to his son. I thought it was only a son with one other person that had worked on the farm, but they do have a shared model, and it's the original owner is still working on the property, but they're transitioning it. So like in terms of that, you know, what are different ways the model can work? They're very fresh as an example of somebody that's doing this. And from what I gather, I mean, I've talked to all the people involved and they all seem to be really happy with the way it's working, and they've worked together for a long time. It's just with different responsibilities shifting out. So just a possibility.
Like, I haven't had a chance to look at your bill yet, but is that a long form, short form?
It's a long form.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does it have language about, you know, kind of conversations on the thing, on what we're talking about, where it's like looking into new opportunities for how we're doing land trust, basically?
Yeah, so there is a section specifically that is tax incentives for land transfer and succession report, where the Agency of Agriculture and the Commissioner of Taxes, and as Jake was saying, that it would also be nice to possibly include the treasurer, could potentially look at some of its current use, how it leads to housing, elements of it. So yes, that is present in the bill, but not with anything concrete. I think I wanted to leave a lot of room for the committee to figure out what that looks like for us in a way that would fit the current agricultural landscape and needs.
So the report then, and we can talk about being more specific with the
Mhm.
report, but
Yeah,
the report would, if there's a time frame on here, but it would be asking secretary, the treasurer, others to dig into what we might not have time to dig into,
yeah.
perhaps a session, or we might.
Mhm.
And I think we should, it might be good to do a little digging on our own before we, turn it into a report.
So along this same thinking, I mean, it'd be interesting to ask VHCB and the land trust about these models of, you know, this 100-acre model of 10 homes on 10 smaller farms, or, you know, a 90-acre farm and 1 acre of intense housing, and just see what, you know, for one thing, the access for future farmers to own a house and a 10-acre farm is a lot cheaper than buying a Nelson farm, you know, and so that access model of money is such a big issue.
You were
Paying 5,000 an
cool to
acre.
just do like them to try it out.
Right, yeah.
Like, let's just see if this works for 10 people.
Yeah,
Remember, when you buy land trust conserved land. And it has to be farmed.
and that, you could still do that, 10
Yeah.
farms, right?
It has to be farmed. And if you want to sell it, you have to sell it to farms.
Yep.
If you don't have a buyer, they'll step in. They have the right of first refusal. They'll step in and buy it back. So if you broke down a 100-acre block into 10 acres, which I could think of all kinds of problems, if it's, you know, spaghetti lots are no good. You know, you gotta put a road in, but you do that, and if farm owner on section 3 decides that they wanna go back and work at the mill and they don't wanna farm anymore, Vermont Land Trust has right of first refusal, buy that back to find another farmer to insert into there. So they just have to change their model to allow little houses. I also liked what you said about, you know, 10 acres and, you know, the cost is prohibited to buy this land. But if you take 10 acres out of that and, or 5 acres or whatever, and put some high stem density housing in, it looks like a woodcock forest. And you now created revenue to offset the cost of the rest of the land. And we need housing and we need land.
And you'll generate more tax dollars.
You generate the tax dollars and all the other things we want with housing, but now you've conserved the rest of the land at a lower price for diversified farming. And believe me, dairying is no great profit driver. You know, there's some, in some ways, a lot of these vegetable farms really generate some profit, you know, on a per acre basis.
Yeah.
All right, well,
We're caught up in TerraForce.
the floor is likely to be not very long this afternoon and again tomorrow morning. I think it's not likely to be very long, so possibly there'll be some time if committee members want to try and connect with any of the groups that we've been talking about, including the agency, and not only on this bill, but also on S60. I think that we've had some feedback on that and what we might want to do to make that better.
Can I add something about that?
Yeah.
So I don't know if everybody got this email or if it was just David and I didn't see all the addresses, but Tina Zook, who's from the American Heart Association, sent an email and said that they had done a study of when I asked about the sugary drinks. And what I found out actually was that we don't actually have a sugary drinks tax right now. Soda currently is not considered an essential food item, so it is taxed at a regular rate, just like if you bought a notebook. But it doesn't, there is not a particular sugary drinks tax. And so there was a look at both raising revenue and also reducing health impacts from people drinking so many sugary drinks by making a targeted tax on sugary drinks. And what they found was the recommended model that they came up with was it would raise $30 million in a year. And if we could add that as an amendment to S60 as a way to fund it, we could actually fund it closer to the level that is the need, you know, maybe the 20 million that NOPA recommended, and we'd have 10 million left. We could decide, do we want to put that at universal school meals or fund to school programs? Like, I mean, to me, it's just kind of amazing. I mean, I know it's a tax and nobody loves taxes, but if you're going to tax something, taxing sugary drinks feels like it might be something that would make sense. And we're taking something negative in health and making something positive for food and farms. So anyway, just something to like stew on as we're thinking about what we're going to do moving forward. Because honestly, I think we all know that if we don't come up with funds for it, it's not going to be helpful. And it's, I mean, even if it passes with a tiny, tiny, tiny little amount designated, it's going to help 3 farmers. And that's not in the big picture going to be sustaining the farming that we want in our state. So anyway, I was very excited about that email. So just
I think other people, it looks like other people were copied on that too.
okay. All right, great.
All right.
I asked Jake too about, he does have the numbers for food sales
Okay.
in Vermont.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, good. Good. All right, I think we can stop there for the morning.
So are we going to come back after the floor or?
Let's, I don't think so, but I would say if you've got nothing else to do and you want to try and make some connections on any of these thoughts,